I'm gonna get this out of the way now. The Moto Z3 is probably the least exciting phone of 2018. And that's a shame because it's coming from a company that has done some pretty innovative things in the past. We had Moto Maker back in the day, which is pretty exciting. And a couple of years ago when they introduced the original Moto Z, we had all these Moto mods, these attachable parts that basically added more functionality to your phone. And Motorola is still using these Moto mods and they're still trying to make more of them. And that's one of the main draws of the Moto Z3. There's a new Moto mod that's gonna give this phone 5G speeds in the future, but take that out of the equation and you have a phone that is really not all that compelling. Okay, so here's why the Moto Z3 is really not all that exciting. This phone right here is the Z3 Play, which came out not that long ago, and it looks exactly like the Z3. The Z3 basically recycles a lot of the components from the Z3 Play. The design is exactly the same, and honestly, there's nothing wrong with that, but it's not new. It still feels great in the hand. It has a nice glass and metal design. It's comfortable, and it's also super, super thin. And it also doesn't have a headphone jack either, like the Z3 Play, if you care about that stuff. The screen is also exactly the same. It's a 6-inch AMOLED screen with 18:9 aspect ratio and 1080p resolution, and it's a fantastic display. But again, same exact screen from the Z3 Play. So on the inside is where you'll find the biggest differences from the Z3 Play to the Z3. But even though this is a 2018 flagship, it doesn't have 2018 specs. It's actually rocking last year's Snapdragon 835 instead of the 845 that we're seeing on pretty much every other flagship. But it still has plenty of RAM, and the 835 is not a slow processor by any means. It's still a very fast processor, and I didn't have any issues with performance on the Z3 at all. It's a very smooth phone. It's just that if you care about specs and you want the latest and the greatest, and you plan on using this phone for a long time, it's gonna come with outdated specs right out of the box. Because this phone is using last year's specs, it's actually cheaper than most other 2018 flagships, a lot cheaper actually. It's $480 outright from Verizon, which is oddly underneath the Z3 Play's price at $500. But something to take note of is you're not getting a Moto mod included in the box. The $480 price tag is actually a pretty good deal, especially if you're on Verizon. But something you have to keep in mind that this phone is an investment in the future. It's gonna get 5G speeds later on with Moto's brand new 5G Moto mod, but this isn't coming out for a while. It's actually not gonna hit store shelves until early 2019. But if you wanna be one of the first people to jump on the 5G bandwagon, this is the phone to do it with. As far as the 5G Moto mod's compatibility, it's only going to work with Verizon at the moment because the Z3 is back to being a Verizon-Exclusive, but it may work with other networks in the future and also with prior Moto Z phones, but Motorola hasn't confirmed anything yet. The thing that's impressed me the most with the Moto Z3 is its battery life. It doesn't have the biggest battery in the world at 3,000 milliamp hours, but it's been able to comfortably last me all day, which I didn't expect, and I'm getting a consistent 5 hours of screen on time and sometimes a little bit more, so I was really pleasantly surprised by how long this phone lasts. Now the camera on the Moto Z3 is actually pretty decent. It's not amazing, but it's not a bad camera either. You have dual 12 megapixel cameras on the rear. The secondary sensor is a monochrome sensor that lets you take true black and white photos, and it also helps capture a little bit more detail. And it also, of course, lets you take portrait mode photos if you want that background blur. It performs pretty well in well-lit or outdoor situations. There's a lot of really nice color, a lot of detail, and dynamic range is also pretty good. I never really noticed any overexposed highlights or underexposed shadows, but it does fall apart extremely quickly in low light. You get a lot of muddy images, soft details, and colors are extremely washed out. So I would try to avoid shooting in low light as much as possible. And as far as the features of this camera goes, it has all the same features that we originally saw in the Z3 Play. So you have these cinemagraphs that let you take animated stills, and Google Lens is also integrated directly into Motorola's camera app. My favorite part about any Motorola phone is the software experience because it's very close to stock. but you get some useful Motorola enhancements like the chop to turn on the flashlight, the wrist twist to launch the camera, and the Moto display. It's running Android 8.1 Oreo at the moment. Hopefully an Android Pie update will be coming up soon, but for now, Oreo is what you get. The only thing that really bogs down the experience for me is the fact that it's on Verizon, and because it's on Verizon, you get a ton of pre-installed bloatware. You get the entire suite of Verizon applications, which nobody really uses, and you also get a bunch of other third-party apps from games and apps like eBay and Bank of America. But thankfully, all these apps can be uninstalled with the exception of the Verizon apps, of course, so that helps clean up the experience a little bit and frees up a ton of space. So that is the Moto Z3 in a nutshell. It's a good phone that doesn't really have any major faults, but the only thing that makes this compelling over other flagships is the promise of 5G. But I don't think there's going to be very many consumers that are going to be willing to invest in a phone with outdated specs with a promise of future technology. So that pretty much wraps up this review of the Moto Z3. Let us know your thoughts down in the comment section below. And if you enjoyed this video and found it helpful, please give it a thumbs up. We definitely appreciate it. Subscribe to the channel, which is down below. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on future videos. And of course, check us out on social media, Instagram, Twitter, Snapchat. All that good stuff is also linked down below. And check out the website as well for more in-depth coverage, AndroidAuthority.com, because we are your source for all things Android.